I want to welcome Kirian von Hest, also known as Deso. He's constantly calling out BS in the financial markets daily on Twitter. He makes bold calls, many of which come true. He is the author of The Definition of Money, The Definitions of Value, and Ethereal Value in a Crypto Future, which should be out when this interview goes live. Welcome, Deso.
Hey, Elliot. Great to be here again.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm happy to have you on because these markets are very interesting right now. You know, there's a massive debate going on. Is crypto money? Is gold money? Central bankers think fiat is money. And because you're at the book Definition of Money, among the other two, I just want to ask you, what do you believe the true definition of money is?
So there's been many forms of money throughout history. And I just wanted to find a singular definition that encompassed all of them, as well as the explanations for that definition to be true in every situation. And I wanted to write those books and these definitions specifically because we're now at, as you say, at a crossroads where many people wonder what money really is. And we are on the verge of a digital era where money as a digital thing doesn't have value in traditional ways. So there's a lot of debate and confusion about it, especially among people who have nothing to do with money in general. They're just regular folk who want to get through their regular days. And, well, I can see how they can get confused in all of this mess. So what I've done is I've written 3 books to basically not only explain what money is, but the thing that is permanently linked with money, intrinsic value, and what value is, how it comes to be and everything, as well as show people what this knowledge can do. Because all throughout my life, even though I've had many criticism of many things, I've always felt it wrong to just deliver criticism. It doesn't fix anything. I'm a problem solver by nature. And while critics are very much necessary, I think if you can come up with a solution, or at least propose one, you should. So that's what I've been working on for a very long time now without anyone knowing, because I've just went off on my own and I wanted to do this on my own. And these books are the result of that. So in the first book, Definition of Money, I talk about money. Very simply, what money is, what it does, what it's used for, how it's been used throughout history, though it's not a historical book. It really goes into the mechanics of money, why money is money, as well as what asset is used as money at any given time. There are reasons for this. There are rules for this. And most of them are incredibly simple. So that's another reason why I wrote the books, because the authorities in charge right now simply don't have a fucking clue what they're talking about. They've been smelling their own farts for so damn long. And they've created layer of complexity, which they all believe has to be there now, because they've been so embedded in that complexity for so long that they've simply lost the plot. And I wanted to explain to people that, yes, this can be very high-level knowledge and very high-level concepts, but they're not that hard to understand. So for me, digital economies and such are fairly common. I've seen a lot of them. I've played a lot of early MMOs before the one that everyone knows was World of Warcraft. And I've seen quite a few of them implode as well because of hyperinflation, because you're continually printing money that's worth nothing. And now the central banks want to do the same thing with CBDCs. So I found it necessary to explain to everyone from the bottom of society to the very top working at the Fed that if you don't do this correctly, you're going to get hyperinflation and you're going to get it fast. So that's basically the book of money. Everything that I've written in there is just to explain all of this. And I show that virtually all of society's ails today can be directly traced back to the distortion of what money is and supposed to be inside a society. So the Fed printing, the crypto bubble, the stock market going insane, the bond market, and everything like that, all can be traced back to the money itself being distorted and devalued. There is basically no more no more value link between modern fiat currency or digital fiat currency and real life. There's no link anymore, and that's why the economy is going haywire, and you get things like $1 trillion worth of reverse repos every day. Well, that's a direct cause of there being too much liquidity.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I mean, you propose a solution in your books, which I've read, and but could you just first summarize, kind of in a nutshell, like what are some of these crazy distortions? What's wrong with the system today? Why does it need a solution?
All right. Well, a couple of the crazy distortions that I mentioned in my books, and I'll jump between the first and the second one. So no comment on where you can find what comment. But for example, the 120 billion of QE a month. In my book, I show that using simple calculation, this $120 billion a month could be used to build nuclear reactors. These 1 gigawatt traditional, far too large, far too expensive to build nuclear reactors, and that's why we're not building them. Well, 120 billion buys 12 of them a month. And if you keep that up for 9 months, that provides enough baseload power for basically 30% of all US homes. The assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which is now 8.2 trillion, is more than enough to provide cheap baseload uranium CO2-free power for double the amount of US households. I'm talking 237 million homes could be powered by what's already on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. 0 reactors were built with this money. Meanwhile, we're trying to build spinny blades of bird death and power generation that gets defeated by a fucking cloud. So
that's a distortion. It's interesting. So they decided to, instead of investing that currency, that excess, fiat currency printing potential that they had into some free energy for the entire country, right? They decided to prop up asset bubbles.
For instance, I mean, these people at the top, these central bankers, have absolutely no idea what they're doing. I mean, just the amount of money that was printed, it includes the government too, by the way, could have set up and started so many real world economies. But the problem is that if the money was actually spent on that, it would have actually ended the real world economy, started circulating within the real world economy, and America would have hyperinflated like half a decade ago. For instance, if that 8.2 trillion was actually spent on construction materials and labor and machinery, instead of being spent on synthetic assets, which are locked on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, well, then the US would have hyperinflated long ago. But it's just to show that the amount of money that has been locked away in synthetic markets is so very, 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 very large that if that ever stops being locked away in the synthetic markets, we're in deep shit. And I don't know if you've seen the March, April, May, and June CPI prints, but even the heavily massaged, extremely suppressed consumer price index is showing very, very much inflation. So it's just going to end in disaster.
Right. So that hyperinflationary potential energy that's stuck in these synthetic markets is like it's a bubble, and if it leaks as it's already doing, that's the window into mass hyperinflation, right?
It's leaked for the last 10 years. I've got an article on my website, desogames.com, which was one of the first I wrote, called QE is inflationary, and I've got the charts to prove it, where I basically line up money velocity, assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, personal food expenditures, and the most important one, share of the wealth of the 1%. So the net worth of the 1% compared to everyone else. It lines up perfectly with an inverted velocity. So as the share of the 1% goes up, money velocity goes down. Almost perfectly correlated. And why is that happening? Because the money that's being printed is being given to the rich, which are putting it in the only container that can contain that amount of liquidity, which is the stock market, which is causing an asset price bubble. And the moment that that asset price bubble is going to flow into real assets, which it does anyway over time, because, you know, dividends, coupons, profit taking, et cetera, and the rich, the 1% owns like 80% of the market. That's not 100% of the market. So over time, the money leaks out of the market anyway. That causes inflation, which is the minimal amount of food inflation we've seen over the last decade in the US, compared to the amount of points that the Nasdaq has gone up, because it's gone up 10 times. Think about that. Think about that for a moment. The Nasdaq has gone up 10 times. We're not talking about a penny stock here. We're talking about the entire fucking market.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what do you mean we're not in a bubble? What do you mean there's no hyperinflation? I mean, the only reason we haven't noticed it yet is because it's all synthetic. The bond and stock markets are synthetic because it's all on paper, you know, paper wins, paper losses. If you don't sell, you don't take a loss, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So just, you know, continuing with these distortions, obviously with this type of environment, there's corruption, there's a lot of issues. So just continue to focus on these issues that need solving, right? I've heard you tweet about how the current gold system and precious metal system is broken, even though they are hard assets, good assets.
Yeah.
Can you just speak, you know, to all the precious metal investors out there? What is going on with this market?
So what's going on is wholesale fraud and pathological lying. There's nothing wrong with what you think of silver. 5,000 years of history hasn't ended. There is massive inflation going on. You should buy precious metals. Why isn't the price going up? Well, because everyone knows this fact. And obviously, all the manipulation is concentrated on keeping the price down and fooling everyone. So there's stuff like in the last 2 months or 3 months, silver took a dive of like 7% in a day. Well, there's a lot of ounces, like 1.5 billion ounces of silver or something, that's being sold into the market on that day. That's more than the world supply of a year, easily. That's like 2-3 years worth of supply. There's not even that amount in the COMEX. There's not that amount in any sort of vault anywhere. But people accept it anyway. Why? Because they don't know. Because they don't know. The majority, you won't see this on CNBC. You won't see this on Amazon, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. It doesn't matter. Because all those people have vested interest in keeping the current fiat money system going. Because they're getting paid by it. Like everybody who works at the Fed is getting new money every year. Where does their salary come from? Well, they print it. If the Fed can't print anymore, they don't get a salary. Wow. Jerome Powell is a centimillionaire. He has more than 100 million. Like his ETFs that he owns is also the ETFs that BlackRock bought in order to support the market via the secondary market facility. Jerome Powell's gotten richer. Jerome Powell is part of the 1%. Jerome Powell says that he's not affecting the 1% and that QE doesn't cause a wealth gap. Are you shitting me? These people are talking their own book. These people are seriously just idiots trying to save their own ass. And they're in charge of everything. But it doesn't make them smart. It just makes them ignorant.
Wow.
So I felt like I had an obligation, since I do know what's going on, to let just ordinary people know what's going on. And that's also something I want to make very clear, that all 3 books, even though the level of knowledge keeps getting higher, it's like a staircase. It's like a very small step staircase. You may have to walk a while, but you can climb it. Anyone can climb it. So I really just wanted to fix problems. Because it's like I said, it's easy to criticize all these things. And I'm not the first one to say all these things. You can look it up on Google interviews. You've had multiple guests who say the same things. So it's not like I'm the only one saying this. But I did want to just solve the whole problem. Not just in creating the new system, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also giving people the right knowledge so they can insulate themselves from the other people saying all this bullshit. Once you understand how simple it is and that it's really not that hard to understand what money is, what's it used for, and that's that, you can hear the Federal Reserve talk about dot plots, and you can immediately understand that, one, none of these things have ever been correct. Two, they make no sense. Three, they don't tell the future. You put 12 monkeys in a room with a dartboard, and you're going to get the same result.
So then just thinking about, like, it is a tough environment. There's that corruption you talked about, the fraud you talked about. So in that environment, like, just thinking, as like a retail investor protecting themselves, finding the value that you define in your second book, right? What kind of are some steps that people can do to protect themselves, and what is the ultimate end game if you do protect yourself in the way that you think makes sense?
Well, the books allow you to figure that out for yourself. That's the reason why I wrote the books. That's the reason why I'm selling the books, is because, well, the reason I'm selling the books is you've seen me on Twitter. I throw out just about all the research I do for free. And I've been just in this battle mode for 1.5 years now, trying to teach people what's going wrong. And I need income myself now, especially with the CPI prints. I'm poor, so I need money. That's why I'm selling them. But apart from that, I really just wanted to show people that you can figure these things out for yourself. And I give an example of that in the Book of Value. I use my timing of the rare earth market to show that using simple logic, keeping time in mind, and looking at utility value, you can predict prices going up on the bottom. So if you want to trade Bitcoin now, I would not suggest go to a fortune teller. Just go to a technical analyst. It's a known asset. A lot of people are trading it. There's unknown factors, sure, which I also talk about in the book, like Tether. But in general, with known assets, you just look at the technical analyst who analyzes what everyone's looking at. But if you want to find that deep value in the markets that no one's looking at, you have to look at it from a macro perspective. How do you do that? How do you go through the process of looking at a macro perspective when none of the math says this is going to happen? Think of Michael Burry, for instance. I mean, he actually looked into the math, and the math says it was wrong, but then he still had to wait 3 years for it to happen. And you could say, well, he was right. Yeah, he was right, but he was early. What explains those 3 years in the middle? Well, that's the things I explain in the book. You have to think of it in ways of conversion rates, for instance. Like, for example, the question of, with all this money printing, why haven't we seen hyperinflation yet?
Exactly.
Well, you have to see that as the people in the economy that believe nothing's wrong have to come to believe something's wrong. If that hasn't happened yet, naturally, you're going to continue on their merry little way. What causes those people to change their mind? Well, that's stuff like psychological triggers, peer pressure, authority figures, reality. Sometimes the situation just becomes untenable simply because, say, the silver price is now $25 and it suddenly drops to $24, nothing happens, and drops to 23.8 and suddenly explodes to 30. Why does that happen? Because there was a mass of people who weren't communicating with each other all at the same time, simply decided that for them, 23.8 was the moment to buy. And because there's such a mass of people that at the same time decide the same thing, it explodes right away. Why did they decide that at that time? Well, that was just the next psychological tick down where there was this mass of people. Just because you can't measure it beforehand doesn't mean that those very same people, independent of each other, weren't already staring at the chart and going, all right, if it drops to 23.8, I'll buy. That's simply a situation that becomes untenable.
Yeah.
That's a reoccurring theme throughout my book, and that is books. And that's reality always demands payment. We can be as foolish as we want, but eventually reality demands payment. And that's the same thing's going to happen to unlimited fiat printing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting. Like you're saying, the psychological trigger point of people trying to all of a sudden care about protecting their money, like when they realize that groceries are up 5% month over month, right?
Yeah.
Shrinkflation, like, oh, well, maybe I'll just put my money in something that does hold value, like gold or silver, intrinsic value to protect yourself, right? They'll run into that.
That's exactly the right reasoning, and that's also exactly the right reasoning why silver hasn't gone up yet. And that sounds silly, but you have to understand that if you say that reasoning to someone else and they look at the silver chart and they say to you, yeah, but silver's gone down, then you already hear the doubt in their voice. And that's simple price chart.
Exactly. And what I love about that is just there's an example of this already. In 2000, ugliest, nastiest chart for gold you'll ever see in your life, followed by a 10x move.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting, Michael Burry, isn't he short bonds now? Like
I wouldn't know. I haven't kept up to date with his portfolio, but I do know that he's expecting basically Weimar hyperinflation.
Right, exactly.
And he's not wrong. The only thing that has caused it not to happen is because too many of the rank and file out there don't understand the damn thing about money. I really thought I made the same mistake. I really thought the comics was going to die before January. I thought at first before January because the fundamentals said it was going to die in December. Then I went past the fundamentals and I said, well, even intuition-wise, it should not last beyond June. We're beyond June now. We've had massive CPI print after CPI print after CPI print. Still hasn't happened. So again, like I said, I can only conclude that I'm not wrong. 5,000 years of history is not wrong. It's just that people have really become this ignorant of finance and what money is and what money does that somebody just needs to tell them. I never wanted to write a book like this before because I always thought if I just explain it to people logically and reasonably, they will think of the answers themselves. I want people to think about things for themselves. On my streams on Twitch, I regularly say, like, I can be wrong. Do your own research. Make sure you double check and recheck things. I'm not infallible, etc., etc., etc. But it's just not enough. It's just not enough. There's too many people out there that want to be told. So I decided just to tell them. And see if that makes a difference.
Absolutely. No, you pack a lot of information into these books, right? So you empower.
That's a small minority complex of me. I never think I'm good enough. I never think I'm good enough to ask for money for the things that I should potentially sell, especially if it's just information. Like, it's just a book. Why would I ask money for a book? I can write this in an article or something. So I've done that so much with this and packed so much information into 3 books that even I'm like, no, I can sell this for $30. There's at least 200, 250, like maybe even $500 worth of value there if you just keep rereading it. One of the proofreaders has already started the trilogy again. And she said to me that even she, on the second time around on the first book, was already picking up more things than she picked up the first time. And she has 3 degrees and taught business for 15 years.
Wow.
So she is actually kind of mad that she was not told any of this in any of her education or schooling or whatsoever.
Wow. Crazy. So anyway, so like, just it's interesting. So yeah, Michael Burry's finally come on to your viewpoint, right? It's really interesting. He's expecting the hyperinflationary collapse. And I think it's pretty obvious with the money printing and the bubbles and the everything, right? That you've been talking about for years at this point, that there is going to be a real financial reckoning, right? But then it's really interesting, right? Because you talk about actually a solution to it all.
Yeah.
You point out the problems and then you point to the solutions. So let's talk about your system.
So for anyone who's already interested in the books and doesn't want them spoiled, because they do care. It's not a narrative book. It's just a textbook. but it does carry a progression towards my system. So if you don't want to hear the big reveal, quote unquote, just turn the interview off, go buy the books, and have a fun time reading them. But I've come up with a system that offers more value than fiat, debt, CBDCs, even gold. I will claim that I've beaten gold and I've created the very first digital sound money system. Value justified in every single way I can think of, which is part of the reason why I wrote the first two books, to show to people that whatever I explain in the third book actually is the truth, because I can explain the explanation, which is the first two books. So let's talk about the system. What do you want to know?
Well, just what does it solve? I mean, I guess we talked about the problems that already exist. So how is the system better than what exists currently in the crypto market, in the precious metal market, in the fiat market?
Right. So let's start with fiat. In that case, it has it easily beat because, like I said, it's digital sound money. Like gold beats fiat because gold is sound money. This system beats fiat too because this system too is sound money. It's value justified via every definition of value that I could possibly find, and I even created one myself in order to still use it to justify this value. In the second book, I described the base value of everything, which I call utility value, which I also then use to justify this new system with value as well. So it has a real world link. You could effectively say that the miners of this currency will be real world miners, except in the digital space. So in that sense, it's just digital gold. But the reason why Bitcoin isn't digital gold, which is what the current belief is, well, I've written those reasons up in my books. The first is store of value, and the second is backed by energy. Well, the backed by energy is very simple. Bitcoin doesn't generate any energy. It uses energy. So if you could slot a Bitcoin into a computer and it would run for an hour, then it's backed by energy because you get energy out of it. Otherwise, it's not backed by energy. So if you calculate a Bitcoin that costs a certain wattage, and then you calculate the next Bitcoin that costs even more wattage, where's the energy backing? You're consuming it. And energy can be wasted. If I collect the energy required to calculate one Bitcoin in the form of oil, put it in a barrel, set it on fire, it generates nothing. What was the value of the energy? Well, it was wasted. It has zero value. It has negative value because you can never use it for anything else again because it's fossil fuel. So just because Bitcoin uses energy doesn't make it backed by energy. It just means that the energy on it is wasted. As for a store of value, what value is stored? That is the one question I have not heard anyone ask ever. What value is stored?
Right. Well, it's actually funny you say it's like lighting a barrel of oil on fire is wasting energy. Well, they lit many barrels of oil on fire and burned a lot of coal to create Bitcoin, right?
For example, but I'm not even concerned about that because my system also uses proof of work, and I've changed it so that it doesn't waste the energy, but it will still use a lot of energy. So I don't mind the energy use. It's just that the question of what value does it store? Well, the ability to be a Bitcoin. If you've got a gold bar stores the value of a gold bar. You can turn a gold bar into jewelry. You can turn it into coins used as a payment method. You can use it in a smartphone because every smartphone has a little bit of gold in it for gold contacts and such. It's an element, so it has industrial elemental uses. Iron stores the value of iron. You can build skyscrapers with it if you turn it into steel. But in order to make steel, you need iron. So iron stores the value of iron. Bitcoin stores the value of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a transactional medium that allows you to do decentralized, trustless transactions. Therefore, it stores the value of transacting trustlessly and decentrally. Other coins can do that. At this point, more efficiently too, and faster. So The value that Bitcoin stores is simply put inferior. And it's not a non-deprecating store of value. That's the other thing you've heard, right? Like Bitcoin is this perfect store of value because it's digital and it's never immutable. Well, first off, it's electrical current. So if you put a USB drive into a vault for 10 years, you're not going to pull the Bitcoin out because the little voltages have just dissipated. You need to put a USB stick into a computer like once a year to make sure that everything's recharged because it doesn't hold electricity perfectly. So that's one thing. But the whole value of Bitcoin is in the transacting. The transacting happens on the basis of whether the network is there or not. No network, Bitcoin can't transact. Therefore, the value that Bitcoin stores is the value of the network, and that network changes all the time. It's gone up, it's gone down. Recently, China banned it. It just banned the Bitcoin miners. You saw the hash graph take a nosedive. Well, that's then the value of Bitcoin taking a nosedive, isn't it? However, there's a snake in the grass. In this case, Bitcoin has what's called an artificial difficulty. That difficulty will just scale up the more people are on the network. It will scale down the less people are on the network. And that's what keeps Bitcoin's transactional speed equal between about 1 to 4 transactions per second. It dropped to a little bit over 1 last June. And it generally peaks at 4. You can see it go wavy on the chart. So let's say that the Bitcoin network just survives for the next 2 decades for whatever reason. Then what you're storing is the ability to transact 1 to 4 times per second. And it costs the energy of a country to do it currently. But that's going to be the same in 10 years. It's going to be the same in 20 years. So that's the value stored of Bitcoin, the ability to transact it at 1 to 4 transactions per second. Compared to other crypto that can do much faster transactions at a lower power usage, those are better. Because if you buy one of those, what value do they store? Well, the ability to do 10 transactions per second, because that's their capability. Now, you could quote the network, the Lightning Network to me to increase the transactional ability of Bitcoin. But then I will say, yeah, but the value that each Bitcoin stores then changes with it. If there's any negative downsides to the Lightning Network, and there are some from what I've read, then those negative traits are transferred to the value that Bitcoin stores. Because now, if you want to trade your stored Bitcoin, your stored value, you have to use the new network with its new functionalities and capabilities. And who says that that network is any good? Because, like I said, there have been some problems with Lightning, and it's not that big yet.
Absolutely.
So that's the value that is stored.
Yep.
Very simple. Is that value any good? Is the next question. And my answer is an emphatically no. No. If it costs the energy of a country to do 4 transactions per second, it doesn't matter what the fuck you buy with that. Whatever system we already have does that much better. And Bitcoin's only use case is bad government. That's it. It's the whole idea of decentralized money, is that the government is corrupt and has control of the money, so we need new money. But the moment you assume good government, which is what you need for good money, the whole problem of Bitcoin goes away, because then you have a fiat system that won't be corrupted because it's good government. At the same time, bad government can ban Bitcoin. Binance is being thrown out of just about every country. We already know that Tether's links with the banking system have been severed before and caused Tethers to trade unbacked for the tune of hundreds of millions. If nobody allows you to buy stuff with Bitcoin directly, then it has no use. And if there's no fiat link, then it also has no use as a fiat transfer mechanism. So then there is no use. There is no value. And it all comes down to a very simple fact that transacting alone doesn't have value. You need something to transact. If I've got a bucket and you want it, but we need some sort of intermediary to determine the value of buckets, or how much you value one bucket. Because I can't trade like 10 buckets against 4 of your car wheels. I don't know if that, and we need a center anchor of value. And that's what the intermediaries are for. So you charge what you need on a daily basis. I charge what I need on a daily basis. And through the average of everyone doing the same thing, a price is established.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you that crypto, especially Bitcoin is probably the worst one, and it has the worst, actual utility. I wanted to get your thoughts on the argument though, that, the right crypto, right? You have Ethereum competing with Polkadot, competing with Cardano. They all want to be the land on which these economic activity is built, right? And therefore, if a whole economy is built on top of the network, then it's like digital land. What is your
take on that? It's not going to work. It's not going to work because they're all approaching crypto from the wrong angle. They're approaching it from price goes up. If we just stuff functionality in there, price goes up. And Ethereum is already running into those problems because it's trying to switch to proof of stake because proof of work is so damn inefficient, and they can't fix it. That's why they're trying to move to proof of stake. But proof of stake has its own problems, namely vested interests, because the more stake you have, the more proof you have. So within no time, the entire system will just devolve into vested interests. Most people with the most money have the most say, just like real life, just like fiat. Well, that didn't work out very well, did it? So that's the same problem with Polkadot, Cardano, all these shit coins, because they all never think about value first and then build the coin around that. No, they have some grand idea of how the world should be, and then they build a coin according to their idea. Doesn't work and it crashes. So what I have done with my system is I've literally first went looking for value. I wrote the second book before I thought about the third. Well, I wrote them all at the same time, but in my head, I thought about value first. And I went looking for specifically digital value, because I can explain the value of a gold bar. It's not a problem. Lots of history there. But how do you explain digital things have value? For instance, we know that people are willing to pay for items in a video game. But those items in the video game are generated on the spot. There's no supply limit. You can run a bot to just farm them for you. Why do people think it has value? Well, that's also described in the book via ethereal values. It's the values that don't exist in reality, but only within the minds of conscious beings. For instance, I example it with a written letter versus a typed letter. A written letter costs more effort, costs more energy to write, and therefore is more inefficient and might be valued less, but it's valued more specifically because it costs more effort, feels more personal. But personality then, something feeling personal, is a completely human value. When you think about it from an alien perspective, the most logical and efficient thing is to just type them. Because aliens don't have our emotions and our way of viewing the world. So I used that knowledge to create a system that is backed by value, just like a gold standard. But in this case, because the value is all digital, it can be built directly into the currency because it's all digital. And in the digital worlds, we are gods. So, shall we go for the big reveal?
Absolutely. How do you get intrinsic value in a digital system?
You use a universal ethereal utility value. That means the value that something has, like gold has the value of gold. And that value is shared amongst all people. So you think gold is shiny, I think gold is shiny, everyone thinks gold is shiny. Only that's transplanted into the digital space. For instance, say there's this top killer video game that everyone loves. And because you think it has value, I think it has value, but it's all digital, but it still has value because we think it has. That asset is mathematical research. Basically, just research for short. So we all value an increased quality of life. We all want to have a better life for us, a better life for our kids, and even a better, a good life or a better life for those who come after us. We're mortal beings, and at one point we will leave this world, and if we're not careful, we might leave it before that time. So we want to survive as much as we can, and that costs effort, costs time, costs resources. So to make that survival easier has been a goal from humanity since we invented farming. Because sometimes when we were still nomads, we came to our feeding spots and they were already empty. And that caused some of us to die out of starvation. Famine is an ugly thing. So we just wanted to survive better, and we started generating food on the spot. Food was the very first thing that went through technological deflation. And we've been doing it ever since, 7,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, whatever you want. So after all this progress, a lot of the research, not all of it, but a lot of it is already digital. It happens in supercomputers, which do, nuclear explosion calculations, structural problems, protein folding. Folding at home is a very, very well-known platform. So I figured out that when used properly, as I've said with virtual labor, there are limits to virtual value that have to be correctly described and adhered to, otherwise it's lost. Because the value is not in any one single unit within the system, the value is of the system as a whole, that whole narrative world that we were talking about. As long as you adhere to those, you can actually have mathematical research as a backing for your currency, just like you can have a gold standard. But because it's all digital, you can completely lock it down. Because gold has one single flaw in our modern age that prevents it from being money ever again. You can't digitize the gold. You can only digitize the promise to the gold. You will always have to trust the central authority keeping your gold in the vault that they actually have it. That's also the reason why my crypto isn't a gold-backed crypto, and I don't support gold-backed cryptos in principle. It's not that they couldn't work, it's just that it's not a trustless system. It's not a decentralized trustless system, because whatever is happening with the coins, you will always need to trust the custodian of the gold to actually have the gold and not be lying to your face. And then you're back to audits and all of that shit. But that doesn't change anything from our current fiat system. It's just a gold standard. So why do you need crypto? You already need to trust that central authority. You might as well just have the central authority print the money. You know, any system that relies on anything else can be glitched. There's always a glitch. So my system just locks it down by keeping it all digital.
Yeah, no, and what I like about it is that it's backed by computing power, right? So if you own one unit of this potential currency, you own the ability to compute, which is
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because it goes to the argument that Bitcoin is backed by energy. While that is not the case, and that can be the case, as I also explained in a chapter in my books, it's not about owning computing power, it's about justifying computing power. Nobody owns energy because the value of energy is undeterminable in front of the use. You can't say energy has this value because it has this use if you don't know the use. So the coin called Recoin, a research coin, it doesn't allow you to own computing power because that has to be supplied when you spend the currency. But it does allow you to own value justified currency, which had energy spent on it, had energy spent on a useful asset, namely research, mathematical computations that increase the quality of life for all. And that then allows you to spend value on the next bit of research that's being done. It's the same as when you hold a gold coin, you don't have to worry about the value of gold because the value of gold is established by physics and it being universally wanted by humans. So you know that the value of the currency is contained within the unit of currency itself. As opposed to, say, a fiat standard where the value of the currency is promised by a central authority. In my system, because math and the immutability of software make sure that you can only spend the currency on generating research while you transact it to everyone else, it means that every unit of currency generated by research done is also backed by that value because it's kept within the same system rather than within the same coin. And that is the way to make digital sound money, is to stop thinking about individual units being value justified. And it's about thinking of the entire system. Is it value justified or not? What do you get out of the entire system? And in Bitcoin's case, you get the ability to transact 4 transactions per second at most. While in my system, you get the ability to apply economies of scale to mathematical calculations, simply because you build it into the currency as a backing of the currency. Well, it's not even that the currency is backed by the research. It's just that the currency was generated by that research. There's no other way to obtain the currency out of nothing other than doing research calculations. Just the same as there's no way to obtain gold out of nothing unless you dig it out of the ground. You have to expend the effort to obtain the gold, which value justifies the gold, which gives it value. In addition to the value of gold being whatever you can do with gold, conductivity, non-reactiveness, all that.
Gotcha. So instead of a Bitcoin being mined through just like a problem that doesn't solve anything, you're saying that this currency would be created by actually solving a problem?
Yeah, I've got a good analogy for this. So I've obviously been thinking on how to explain this very high level information to others. Here's an analogy. So what Bitcoin is currently, oversimplified, but still, is just a guy standing outside of a building handing out Sudoku puzzles. And he says to you, if you're the fastest one to solve this, I'll give you a bit of money. Obviously, that makes him a very popular guy. So there's a lot of people around solving Sudokus. Now, because of a lot of people, it wouldn't be fair if it was very fast. It causes problems. So the more people that get added around the guy, the difficult the Sudokus get, the more difficult. And that's basically the system. Because there's an element of randomness involved, different people finish first each time. But, some people are equally fast. And they get the payout every time they hand in the Sudoku. And that's it. Because, Bitcoin's transactions only transactions. What my system is the same guy. So I'm actually using Bitcoin as a base. Therefore, my system is open source in every respect. Anybody can make this. So the guy is standing outside of a track field, a running track. Same guy, same Sudokus. They're a lot easier to do, though. So if you solve the Sudoku, normally you get a payout, but in my system, you get a ticket. And you ask, what's this ticket for? Well, it allows you to run on the track behind him. So every time someone solves a Sudoku, they get a ticket and they start running. After they finished around the track, then they get a payout. So they need to run around the track. Now, normally where Bitcoin security comes from, because, many people have worked on this problem before and failed. So I want to tell everyone where the success is. Normally, you need about 50% of the people. No one person in that whole group of Sudokus can have more than 50% computing power. because then they can calculate and verify a Sudoku before someone else can just calculate and verify them. So that allows you to double spend, and the network's not secure, yada, yada, yada. What my system does is that even if someone has 99% of all computing power, doesn't matter, because all he gets is a ticket to start running on that track. And I've made my system in such a way that the faster you are in computing power, mathematically, the longer you need to run. However, because you need to spend more time running, you also get more money. So to bring it a bit down again, it works with these work units that Folding at Home distributes. The faster your computing speed is, the more of the work units you need to do. So the longer you run around the track. Therefore, everyone exits the track at about the same time. Not same speed, same time. But because some will have done more work than others, some will get a higher payout than others. The payout is determined by the work done. However, the time spent on running around the track is determined on how fast you are. Usain Bolt needs to run longer than a grandma because he's faster. So what this causes is that if you have like two guys that want to, or one guy with a lot of computing power that wants to destroy the network, he can't because he needs to start running. And before he is stopped running, the next person in line will have done another Sudoku, which includes verifying his, which, because it's easy, will go really rapidly, and then has verified that person, if they're a fraud, to be a fraud. So before that person even stops running around the track, they're booted from the entire network because their wallet has become untrusted. Because you can make these Sudokus really easy now, because they have to keep running, they're running for a while, and someone else will verify them, you can make Bitcoin a lot faster. The guy can just keep handing out Sudokus like it's nothing, because every time he does, they start running, and they're no longer available to falsely verify another transaction. And the running around the track is doing mathematical computations in distributed computing.
Yeah. So what is the running on the track mathematical computations? Are they different than the Bitcoin problems?
Yes. Yes, because Bitcoin is a very simple hashing algorithm. You can basically think of Bitcoin as you have a website with a username, but you forgot your password. All right, 1, enter, 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter, 5, enter, 6, enter. That's literally what Bitcoin is. When they're talking about exahashes, they're talking about this process happening quintillions of times per second, or quadrillion. I don't know. It's really a lot. But that's all it does. Every single calculation is the exact same calculation. It's just you have a hash and you're trying to find it by just putting in a lot of hashes until you get the right one. The energy is wasted. Like I say in my book, if you have a pile of sand and you move it a meter to the left and then you move it a meter to the right, has the pile of sand gained value? No, it's not. In fact, that is a very well-known punishment throughout the ages, specifically because the pile of sand never gains value. But that's exactly what Bitcoin is. You have to calculate you move a pile of sand to the left, and then you can spend the Bitcoin, and then you move it to the right, and you get the Bitcoin back.
Right. So your system, what value does it add?
It's very simple. It takes that same system, because you still need it in order to have a little bit of randomness, to make sure that no two-person or like a string of people in a line can verify each other's calculations by getting the processing speed exactly behind each other, But because it can be made really easy, it becomes a tender offer. So effectively, rather than calculating a Bitcoin and then getting a payout after calculating the Bitcoin, you calculate the Bitcoin as an offer. Like, I can calculate it this fast, or I can calculate it this fast. So rather than rather than bid a price, you're bidding computational speed. You can think of it like that. But as soon as that bidding process is over and you have been selected, you've been given your ticket and you can start to run, at that point, you no longer need to do hash calculations. You can use that calculating capacity to do mathematical calculations. You start receiving work units from the secondary network, which you are transferred over to the running track, and you start doing those work calculations. And every time you calculate one of those work units, you get some amount of Recoin, which is a cryptocurrency. So while for you, you're getting money, on the other hand, the people who are getting their calculating done are researchers who need mathematical research calculated. For instance, Folding at Home folds proteins, which are found in the human body, to see how they function. We kind of know what they do because we can observe the effects in our bodies and in the lab. We just don't know how to get there via this folding process. We can calculate it, but we have to brute force it. Basically, we fold the protein many, many, many times until it actually does what we think what we observed it to do. And then we know how it folds and what kind of effects that has. So it's just a lot of parallel calculations that need to be done. But it's not a very simple calculation. It's just a hard calculation. It's just that doing it once is still pretty simple, but we need to do it a couple of million times. So that's the value that my network brings, and that's the reason why it is the first digital sound money system, is because that information is by itself ethereal. If we know how a protein falls in our body, that's a process that we've described on a piece of paper or on a computer or in a PDF, you know? The cats are not going to care. The dogs are not going to care. Again, that is something that has value only to us because we value it. No other reason. Yet, it still needs to get done because biomedical science is something we want. We want people to stay healthy. Or a structural calculation is something that needs to be done because we want to have beautiful buildings. We don't just want to have buildings. There's not just gray boxes everywhere. No, architecture is the thing. But that requires structural calculations, and the more complex they get, the more calculations you need to do. Another very good example that I put in my books, because these books are written for everyone. I want to make sure that people know this. I've not just designed a singular system and this is the way to do it. No, I've made a framework. Within that framework, there's still a lot possible, but that framework makes sure that you never cross the line and it won't hyperinflate. So for example, everyone knows that video rendering, is a very parallel task. I mean, you have your channel, you know. So when you see a blockbuster movie with a lot of CGI, well, that costs a lot of rendering time. Yet it is still the same process as rendering a YouTube video because it's just the way things are done. So if somebody sets up a network like my network, but instead of using research as the main unit of value, they use visual processing as the main unit of value, then you can basically make a network that can frame render blockbuster CGI movies for those studios simply by giving a single frame to a single work unit and then distributed it across the world. That would, for instance, allow movie studios to attain a whole new level of CGI quality. It will allow indie studios to basically get blockbuster CGI movies, and it would allow anyone who offers up the computer for that calculating time to be properly compensated for it. Now, just let's get into that because I'm sure people are curious. How do we get compensated for it? The mining, right? Because that's the whole thing about Bitcoin mining. Who gets to do the mining? Who's the beneficiary and everything? With my system, it's split. So the people who determine the price are not the people who get the money. The secondary research network that's integrated with the first network is where researchers spend money on research. This is still what determines the price. So if the researchers want to spend more money on more research, then the miners get more money. If they don't want to spend as much money on research, the miners get less money. And it uses a concept, again, of value transference, which is one of the major concepts that have been invented and will be very important this century and beyond. And that's the idea of currency does not have to be transacted in order to contain its value. You can have currency and then is transacted currency plus product, or you can have currency destroyed is currency generated plus product. It doesn't matter that the currency does not pass from my hand to your hand as long as it gets to you. So if I give you $200, that's transacting. But if I put $200 into a machine and you get to pull $200 out of a machine, then it is still the value of that money transacted to you, even though my machine has shredded the dollar and your machine has printed the dollar. You still have $100. I still lost $100. That is value transference. So in my system, what happens is that researchers collect Recoin, they spend it into the system, it is destroyed, and then the research they buy with it gets calculated by the miners, who then get a payout from the system when it is generated. And this causes the value of the currency to be transmuted from the currency into work units into currency. And that's how it value justifies the whole system. It's not a singular unit of currency that is value justified. It's the entire system that is value justified. As long as you keep the amount of currency printed in relation to the currency spent, value is consistent. And that is also something I've described. I've made the system in such a way that it solves inflation and deflation. I'm pretty sure nobody even thought that was an option up until this point, that you could solve inflation and deflation. I have. System auto balances based on economic activity. If you need more currency, there will be more currency. If there should be less currency because value has disappeared, but we don't want to stop printing, the system will drain it anyway. Because guess what? Sometimes you just need less currency. Let me give another simple analogy for that you also give in the books. Let's say you have a very simple economy of 10 breads, 10 people, and $10. In that situation, one bread will cost $1. Very simple. Now, let's add a person. Now you have, and let's say at the same time that the baker sees this extra person alive, so he bakes an extra bread. Now you've got 11 people buying 11 breads with $10. Clearly, that can't happen. You need to disperse this $10 among those 11 people. So what happens is that the price of the bread will drop down to 0.9 cents, 90 cents. So instead of 10 breads for $1 with 10 people, you buy 11 breads with 11 people for 9 cents a bread. And then it equalizes out again. On the other hand, if someone dies, you now need to buy, and let's say the bread also doesn't get baked. You need to buy 9 breads with 9 people for $10. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So this $10 is going to disperse itself over those 9 people, and suddenly the price of bread costs $1.10. And the reason why you don't want that is because of those 9 people who are left, not all of their wages will increase. Their ability to earn money does not change. So next cycle, some of them will only earn $1, but the bread costs $1.10. They won't be able to buy the bread. They will starve. Famine like that in hyperinflation is so many times it happened in history already. However, very simple solution. If you take out $1 and you destroy it, then you have 9 breads, 9 people, $9. If you print $1, you have 11 people, 11 breads, $11. And the price stays stable. That is the mandate of the Federal Reserve. a stable currency, to keep prices stable. That's also the mandate that they've just completely raped with their incessant incompetence over more than 100 years, because they have done nothing but make prices unstable, especially if you compare it to how much things used to cost 100 years ago and how much they cost now. It's ridiculous. So my system makes sure, because it's not a fractional reserve system, it is a sound money system. It makes sure that when there's more research ordered than there's network capacity, there will be more money. If there's less research ordered than network capacity, there will be less money. And since it's this network capacity, the miners that get the payout, it's also the miners that either benefit or suffer from more or less money. And that's also what makes it fair. They get more money when the economy grows. And because of the Cantillon effect, since they're the first one to spend the new money, their money still holds the old purchasing power. So they benefit the most. At the same time, if there's deflation and the miners get less money, they suffer the most, because now they get less money to buy products produced at a higher purchasing power or a lower purchasing power per unit. So inflation hurts them, deflation hurts them, but it's always the same people getting hurt. And these people don't have any say over how much money is printed. That is that is why I say that my whole system is socially balanced between mutually assured destruction and mutual interest. Basically, the only two geopolitical policies that have ever worked. Simply because, for instance, if you want to do the financial calculations but not the research work, that doesn't do anything for you, because the payout doesn't happen until after you've done the research as well. I also have worked out a second layer system right from the get-go, which allows trustless, centralized processors. Basically, because of the functionality of my base system, I've managed to create trustless PayPals and Visas, which you can set up from your own home and grow profitably from the start. Because I don't believe in this Amazon model of running at a loss to get market cap either. I don't believe in it. I believe you run profitably from the start and you just grow based on service. So my whole system is designed for that. But that's also a system of mutual destruction. For instance, if your wallet does the research, does the financial calculation for the central node, but doesn't do the research, you get booted off. Meanwhile, the central node has an incentive to boot you off, because if you don't do the research, you don't get a payout, and they live off your fees, your connectivity fees. So they don't get any money. Naturally, they're going to boot your ass off if you're untrustworthy. At the same time, if the central node screws you around, you can just disconnect your wallet and can reconnect to another node, verify, the network has forced mathematical audits, because I now have a base research network that can do research calculations. I can also chop up the blockchain and check if the blockchain's legit.
Great.
So the whole thing just runs on a connected system of everybody keeping everyone in check. It's just a giant Mexican standoff, but it works. It works beautifully.
Oh, it's truly fascinating. Yeah, it's like so there's inherent value to each of these transactions, and therefore there's inherent value to the currency. Really, really interesting. So, we covered a whole lot. We scratched the surface of what's in your books, but is there anything else you want to add before we talk about where people go to learn more?
Oh God, I don't think I could do an accurate interview for the books, even if I spent 10 hours talking. There's just so much in there.
Right.
The main thing I want to press on everyone's hearts, as we say in Dutch, is that I've written the books for everyone. Maybe not everyone can build the system, but by being able to understand it, you will at least know which of the future cryptocurrencies has value. I just want the suffering to stop. The central bank idiocy, the descriptions that are all over the normal economy because of what they're doing. Like the supply chain shortages that America's suffering right now are also explained in my books, where they come from. And I just wanted to come up with a currency that finally ends all these problems, that really can work outside of government. Eventually, the governments will adopt it, they will absorb it, and they will regulate it, because no government doesn't work either. We've seen that in the current crypto space with all the frauds. So I genuinely just wanted to write a trilogy of books for every single person out there. For the people who love Bitcoin, I basically fix it. There's problems with it, but they can still be fixed. And I show you how. If you've got a Bitcoin competitor like Bitcoin SV, this system is still for you. It's an economic framework. So even though there's a few set rules, there's stuff like block sizes, which I mentioned, but I don't recommend, say, you should go solid block size or dynamic block size or big block size. I don't mention any of that, simply because my system can be applied to all of that. I don't know which the perfect solution is, and I'm giving this to the free market to figure it out, like it always has. It's the last chance we have to make money free. After this, the CBDCs will lock us all up. And then the central bank, who's never made a correct decision in their life, get to decide how you spend your money. And when, too, because, you know, the Chinese central digital bank currency has an expiry date if they want to. So...
yeah, that's what I'm saying. The blockchain itself is a very big brother type of technology, right? It's like, okay, everything's tracked forever. You know, it's just like, what the heck? Yeah, no. So they're obviously going to love that. I
may be critical of crypto, but I'm not critical because I don't like it. I'm critical because it could actually be used to do some real good this time, and it's being corrupted by fraud and shysters and charlatans, and everyone seems to support them. We're supposed to get away from that system. So call me the sheriff, but I'm bringing the law to town, and I'm telling everyone how to do it properly. And I'm not holding back either. This is for everyone. And the no-coiners, the coiners for life, both can find their answers in my book. It will tell you, the no-coiners will be able to say, yes, that's exactly why it didn't have value. And while the Bitcoiners will be able to say, yes, that's exactly how it could have value. This is what we thought, this is what we wanted to do, but we just didn't have the theory available. I've done it. I've done it. This is Bitcoin 2.0. I've even changed the name of proof of work to proof of value, because my system is value justified. And I've explained it in every damn way you can think of. I dare anyone, traditionalist or crypto cultist, to buy my books, look at my system, and design a better one. Don't just criticize. Come up with something better. Come on, I dare you.
Perfect. So where can people go to, learn more about this, get your book, follow your updates?
So you can follow me on Twitter, where I'm most active, at Deso Games. Where you can get the books is hopefully every digital bookstore. They're releasing an ebook form first because of genuinely the importance of this information. I don't want to wait until I have it in print and in audiobook form and everything. No. They're coming in ebook form first to as many stores I can publish. Currently, they're already in some books for some stores for pre-order, but more should be added across the week. They're released on August 1st. And after they're released, I'm going to go look at doing an audiobook. So the audiobook will come in the future. And as soon as I get into the print-on-demand service, I will put them in print as well. But that's I'm using Draft to Digital, and their print service is in beta, so that might take a while. Obviously, the better the digital books do, the further I get moved up the queue, because that's just the way the world works. But no, I wanted to get this out to people as soon as possible. If you wanted to buy it at your favorite bookstore, you can find the links in my Twitter profile. I'll keep them in my bio for quite a while. Which are universal book links, and you can just select the store. But they should be in your favorite bookstores by now. And as soon as the audiobook comes out, and as soon as the print book comes out, you can find it on Twitter.
This discussion is for informational purposes only. Nothing in this discussion should be taken as investment advice. Guests are not compensated for their appearance. Do not base any investment decisions on the information presented.